Have you ever heard of Oman? Probably not. It's that small Persian Gulf country that everyone ignores while talking about Dubai and Abu Dhabi. But behind the facade of a peaceful and tolerant sultanate hides a reality that will leave you speechless. A country where modernity coexists with medieval traditions, where skyscrapers shine next to domestic slave markets, where oil wealth coexists with hidden poverty. Oman is not what it seems. It's not the Eastern paradise of tourist brochures. It's a social experiment where the 21st century violently clashes with the 7th century, where human rights are optional and where freedom is an alien concept. Today you'll discover 15 shocking facts about Oman that nobody has ever told you. Truths that will make you understand how a Gulf Sultanate really works, what it means to live under an absolute monarchy disguised as modernity, how hypocritical a system can be that preaches morality while hiding unspeakable sins. And I warn you, some of these truths will piss you off, others will disgust you. All of them will open your eyes to a world that the West prefers to ignore because it does business with these countries. If you want to see the Middle East without filters, the real one hidden behind golden facades, hit like and subscribe to the channel. This is the type of content that nobody has the courage to make. Let's start. 15. The absolute monarchy disguised as modernity. Oman is an absolute monarchy. The Sultan controls everything: government, parliament, army, justice, media, economy, everything. It's not a constitutional monarchy like in Europe where the king cuts ribbons. Here the Sultan is the state. He decides what's legal and what's not, who lives and who dies, what you can say and what you must keep quiet. There's no separation of powers. There are no checks and balances. There's no democracy even on paper. Sultan Haytham bin Tariq has ruled since 2020, after the death of his predecessor who reigned for 50 years, half a century of absolute power. And you know how he came to power? Not with elections. He was chosen by the royal family. The people count for nothing. They have no voice, no choice. But here's the trick. Oman presents itself to the world as moderate and tolerant. It organizes international conferences, makes deals with the West, gets praised as the most peaceful country in the Middle East. It's brilliant marketing, perfect propaganda, but behind the facade, a dictatorship that controls every aspect of life. Criticize the government on social media? Jail. Protest in the square? Jail. Write an uncomfortable article? Jail. Tolerance in Oman works only if you shut up and obey. It's facade modernity built on medieval foundations, sparkling skyscrapers that hide a feudal system where the Sultan is king, judge and god on earth. Welcome to Oman, where the 21st century is just an optical illusion. 14. The kafala system. Modern legalized slavery. Get ready to discover one of the most disgusting systems legalized in the modern world. Kafala is the sponsorship system that regulates migrant workers. On paper it seems harmless. A foreign worker needs a local sponsor. In practice, it's legalized slavery. Your sponsor, the kafil, has total control over you. He owns your passport, can decide if you can change jobs, if you can leave the country, if you can even change cities. And you know who these workers are? Mainly Asian women, working as domestics, Indian and Bengali workers on construction sites, Filipinos in stores, desperate people who arrive hoping for a better life and end up trapped. The stories are horrifying. Domestics locked in houses for years without being able to go out. Raped by employers, beaten, not paid for months. Workers who work 12, 14 hours a day, under the sun, at 122 degrees Fahrenheit for starvation wages. They sleep 10 to a room, don't see their families for years, and if they protest they get deported. If they escape, they become illegal and end up in jail. But here's the part that will make you vomit. This system is legal. It's protected by law. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the UN have been denouncing it for years. But Oman doesn't give a damn. It says it has reformed the system. What reforms? Cosmetic ones on. Paper never applied. Kafala continues because Oman's economy runs on the exploitation of millions of foreign workers. Without them, the country would collapse in a week. So they continue to. call them workers instead of slaves, and everyone pretends nothing's wrong. 13. Islamic laws that control every aspect of life. Oman is an Islamic state. Sharia is the primary source of legislation. Medieval Islamic laws control every aspect of your life. Are you Muslim in Oman? You can't leave Islam, it's illegal. Apostasy is punishable by jail. You can't drink alcohol publicly. You can't eat in public during Ramadan. You can't have sexual relations outside of marriage. And careful, it doesn't only apply to Muslims, it applies to everyone. Are you gay? Welcome to hell. Homosexuality is illegal and punishable with 3 years in jail for loving the wrong person. Police raid venues, arrest people based on dating, apps, torture confessions, and society is even more ruthless. If you get discovered, you can be disowned by your family, fired, expelled from university, assaulted. Many Omani gays live double lives, straight in public, gay in private. Some commit suicide, others escape if they can. The majority survive in a suffocating closet their entire lives. Are you a woman? The laws are against you. A man can divorce by saying, "I repudiate you" 3 times. A woman must go to court, prove serious abuse, often fails. A man can marry up to 4 women. A woman can marry only 1 man. A male child inherits double what a daughter inherits. A man's testimony is worth double that of a woman. And these aren't old laws. They're applied today. Oman is a country where medieval code decides how you must live, love, dress, pray, and if you don't like it, leave the country or end up in jail. 12. Total censorship. The country where the internet is a prison. In Oman, there's no freedom of expression. Media are state-controlled. Newspapers publish only what the government approves. TV broadcasts propaganda 24/7. The real prison is the internet. The government controls and censors everything. Blocked websites by the thousands, VPNs technically illegal. Social media constantly monitored. Every post, every comment, every like gets tracked. Criticize the Sultan on Facebook. Police show up. Post an immoral video on Instagram. Arrest. Write a tweet against the government. You disappear for weeks. And these aren't empty threats. Dozens of activists, bloggers, journalists have been arrested. Some sentenced to years in jail for insulting the Sultan or threatening national security. Their crimes: having written critical articles, having asked for reforms, having denounced corruption. One famous case, a blogger arrested for writing that corruption exists in Oman. Jail for telling the truth. But here's the trick. They don't arrest everyone. They arrest enough people to terrorize the others. It's censorship through. Example. The result? Mass self-censorship. People have learned not to talk, not to criticize, not to think too much. Political conversations whispered in private. Social media full of photos of. Sunsets and food but zero political content. A society silenced by fear, and the West continues doing business with Oman, selling it weapons, praising it as a reliable partner because oil money has no smell, not even when it reeks of repression. 11. The double standard. Alcohol, prostitution and hypocrisy. Officially, Oman is a conservative Muslim country where alcohol is forbidden and prostitution is illegal. Officially. In reality, everything is available. Alcohol is sold legally in hotels and venues for non-Muslims. The venues are full of Omanis drinking whiskey and beer, but on paper they're all non-Muslims for that evening. It's institutionalized hypocrisy. Everyone knows, everyone sees, nobody says anything. The government pretends to enforce Islamic law while collecting taxes on alcohol sales. And prostitution? Officially illegal and immoral. In practice, Muscat is full of prostitutes, mainly from Ethiopia, Morocco, Eastern Europe, Asia. They work in luxury hotels, private apartments, through apps. The clients? Mainly rich Omanis, Western expats, Gulf businessmen. Police know, but turn a blind eye as long as everything stays discreet. Occasional raids to show. They're fighting vice. Arrests of some poor girl. Then everything goes back to normal. The organizers, the pimps, the rich clients, never touched. Because in Oman there are two justice systems. One for the rich, one for the poor. But here's where hypocrisy reaches surreal levels. The same men who drink and go with prostitutes on Saturday, on Friday, they're in the mosque praying and judging others for immorality. The same religious people who preach purity have lovers and drink in private. It's an entire society built on lies, where everyone lies and everyone knows others are lying, but nobody can tell the truth. It's social theater, where everyone plays their part, and whoever breaks the fiction gets punished, not for the sin, but for daring to tell the truth. 10. Temporary marriage, prostitution with religious certificate. Temporary marriage, called nikah muta or nikah mishar, is a practice where a man marries a woman for a limited period, from 1 hour to a few months. He pays a dowry. They have sexual relations. Then the marriage ends. You understand what it is? Prostitution with religious certificate, a way to get around the prohibition of sex outside of marriage, transforming prostitution into temporary marriage. Genius, right? Officially, Oman doesn't recognize temporary marriage, but in practice it happens, especially with poor foreign women. They arrive with tourist visas, get temporarily married, used sexually, paid little, then abandoned. Some get pregnant, get kicked out, end up on the street with unrecognized children. Others contract diseases, others get trafficked by criminal organizations, and the most disgusting part? It's sold as Islamically legitimate. There are compliant imams who certify these marriages. There are apps and dedicated sites. There are agencies that organize these encounters. It's an industry that exploits desperate women using religion as cover. And the state turns a blind eye because it's convenient. Because if it had to arrest all the men involved, they would have to arrest half the elite. So they arrest some poor foreign woman, deport her, and the system continues. Welcome to the morally superior country that uses religion to justify sexual exploitation. 9. The tribes and the tribal system that controls everything. Oman is not a united country. It's a collection of tribes held together by the monarchy. The tribal system still controls a lot. Who gets state jobs? Who can marry whom? Who has access to resources? Your tribe determines your social status more than your education. There are noble tribes descended from the Prophet. Pure Arab tribes. Mixed tribes. Tribes of slave origin. And yes, in 2025 in Oman, there's still discrimination based on whether your ancestors were slaves or not. Noble. Families don't marry their daughters to men from lower tribes. The best jobs go to members of the right tribes. The army and police are dominated by tribes loyal to the Sultan. It's a feudal system disguised as a modern state. And the Sultan maintains power by playing tribes against each other, giving favors to some to buy loyalty, punishing others to maintain control. Divide and conquer applied tribally. The result? A divided society where tribal identity counts more than citizenship, where nepotism isn't corruption, but tribal loyalty, where merit doesn't count because what counts is who you know and which tribe you're from. And young Omanis educated abroad who return with modern ideas clash with this wall. They want meritocracy, but find tribalism. They want equality, but find rigid hierarchies. Many get frustrated and emigrate. Oman loses its talents because the medieval tribal system kills any possibility of real modernization. 8. Systemic racism against blacks and Asians. Oman has a huge racism problem that nobody wants to admit. There's a clear racial hierarchy. At the top are Omani Arabs, from noble tribes, then Gulf Arabs, then white Westerners, then Arabs from poor countries, then Asians. At the bottom, black Africans. This hierarchy determines everything. Salary, respect, legal treatment. 2. People with the same job get paid differently based on passport and skin color. A Western engineer earns 5-6 times more than an Indian engineer with the same skills. A white manager gets treated with respect. A Filipino manager like servants. And blacks suffer the worst racism. They get called ABD, slave, openly discriminated against in stores, restaurants, offices. Police stop them more often. Employers prefer them for menial jobs. There's still the attitude that blacks are inferior, a legacy of Arab slavery history in Africa that nobody wants to remember. But here's the hypocrisy. Oman presents itself as a tolerant country, signs conventions against racism. But in practice, racism is daily, normal, accepted. There are no laws against racial discrimination at work. You can be fired because you're black and there's nothing you can do. You can be paid less because you're Asian and it's legal. It's systemic, institutionalized racism. 7. Women, second-class citizens by law. In Oman, women are second-class citizens. It's not opinion, it's law. A woman needs permission from her male guardian to marry, travel abroad until age 21, undergo certain medical procedures, open businesses in certain sectors. The concept of male guardianship is law. An adult, educated, capable woman is legally under the control of a man. In 2025, in marriage, a Muslim Omani woman can't marry a non-Muslim. An Omani man can marry a Christian or Jew without problems. A divorced woman automatically loses custody of male children at 7 years old, of daughters at 9. The father has automatic right. In inheritance, the daughter receives half of the son, always automatically. In court, the testimony of 2 women equals that of 1 man, in certain cases. But here's where it becomes surreal. The government boasts about progress in women's rights. True, women can study, work, drive, but these are crumbs. Educated Omani women travel. See how women live in normal countries, return and clash with a system that treats them as perpetual minors. Many fight for changes but get silenced as westernized. Feminism is almost a dirty word. Asking for equality is seen as an attack on Islam. Sikhs, economic nationalism, forced Omanization. Oman has a problem. Too many foreigners, too many unemployed Omanis. The solution? Omanization. A policy that forces companies to hire citizens instead of foreigners. On paper it's fair. Priority to citizens. In practice, disaster. Many young Omanis were educated in a system that guaranteed automatic state jobs. They don't have competitiveness, work ethic, skills required. They want high salaries, reduced hours, generous benefits. But they don't have productivity that justifies these costs. So companies are forced to hire unqualified Omanis. Pay them higher. Salaries. You can't fire them easily. Result? Inefficiency, inflated costs, reduced competitiveness. Many Omanis hired by quota do nothing. Know they are untouchable. Qualified foreign workers do the real work while Omanis collect paychecks. Small companies fail. Large ones bypass the rules. And young people. Many remain unemployed because they only want comfortable state jobs. Refuse the private sector. Below their dignity. They wait years for a state position while they could be working. The rentier mentality has created generations who feel entitled to welfare without effort. But oil is running out, and young people aren't prepared. It's a social time bomb. 5. The hidden debt. The economic bomb. Oman has a dirty secret. It's almost bankrupt. Public debt has exploded to 80% of GDP. In a few years, it went from rich country to heavily indebted. Why? Because for decades it spent as if oil at $100 would last forever. Inflated salaries, massive subsidies, pharaonic projects, rampant corruption. When the price collapsed, instead of cutting, it took loans, billions in loans. And now Oman can't repay. Had to ask richer countries for help. Had to cut subsidies, causing protests. Had to introduce taxes in a country used to zero taxes. The population is pissed, young people protest, the government responds. With arrests. It's a cycle. Less money, more discontent, more repression, more instability. And oil is running out. Reserves for 15, 20 years, then disaster. But here's the worrying part. Oman controls the Strait of Hormuz, through which passes a third of the world's oil. If it collapses, the global impact would be enormous. And what does the government do? Cosmetic reforms, facade diversification, nothing structural. Continues spending on useless projects, bribing tribes, repressing instead of reforming, puts band-aids on arterial bleeding. 4. Invisible repression. How opponents disappear in Oman. There are no public executions like in Saudi Arabia. Repression is more subtle but no less effective. Opponents aren't publicly killed, they simply disappear. Nighttime arrests, detentions without trial, torture in secret prisons. They're released after months, psychologically broken, terrorized into not speaking anymore. It's scientific repression. Designed not to make international news. Activists disappear for weeks. Families don't know where they are, can't visit them. When they're released, they sign silence documents. Who speaks disappears again. Longer, some are never seen again. Officially emigrated. In reality, nobody knows. It's terror that works because it's invisible, doesn't make headlines, doesn't generate international protests. Oman maintains the image of peaceful country while disappearing anyone who disturbs this narrative. And torture, documented but denied. Beatings, sleep deprivation, isolation, sexual abuse. The purpose isn't extracting information, it's breaking psychologically. Many come out traumatized for life, some commit suicide afterwards, others emigrate, the majority resigns to silence. 3. The water crisis. The desert that wants to live like Europe. Oman is running out of water. Literally, it's one of the most arid countries in the world. Rains very little. Has no rivers. 100% of drinking water comes from desalination or from aquifers that are running out. Consumption is among the highest in the world. Why? Because people live as if water were infinite. Villas with huge pools, green gardens in the middle of the desert, golf courses, water parks, fountains everywhere. It's ecological madness, trying to live European style in a desert environment. But desalination costs energy. Lots of energy. Oman burns oil to produce electricity to desalinate water to waste in pools. It's unsustainable. And when oil runs out, how will they produce water? The government has no answers. Talks about renewables, but they're paper plans. Reality is that Oman lives above its water. And energy means, and the growing population, more people, more consumption, more pressure on aquifers, more costs. Already now many rural areas have limited access to drinking water. Must ration. But in Ban, rich people's villas, the pools are always full. It's environmental injustice where the rich waste while the poor ration. When the crisis worsens, guess who will suffer? 2. Dead workers. The scandal. Nobody talks about. Every year, hundreds of migrant workers die in Oman. Mainly on construction sites, but also domestics, agricultural workers, industrial workers. Causes? Heat strokes working at 122 degrees without protection. Accidents due to lack of safety. Suicides from despair. Murders by violent employers. Embassies report alarming numbers, but there are no official statistics. The government doesn't publish data. Why? Because the numbers are embarrassing. And what happens when a worker dies? Often nothing. The employer pays a few thousand rials to the family. The body gets sent home. Case closed. No investigation. No punishment. No adequate compensation. A migrant worker's life is worth less than a camel's. At least the camel has economic value. The worker is replaceable in a week. It's complete dehumanization. But here's the scandalous part. Many projects where workers die are built with Western money, for Western companies, using Western technology. Luxury hotels, airports, roads. The West is complicit, buys products built on the blood of exploited workers. But nobody talks about it. Why? Because profits are too good. Oman is a reliable partner, tourist destination. Who cares about invisible dead people? 1. The illusion of tolerance. The country that deceives the world. In the end, one truth remains. Oman is an illusion. The image of a tolerant country is marketing built on repression and exploitation. The West believes it because it's convenient. Oman buys weapons, offers military bases, maintains stability. So we close our eyes to everything. Absolute monarchy, human rights violations, exploitation of millions, medieval laws. Oman's tolerance is selective. Tolerant toward those who obey, intolerant toward those who dissent. It's a facade that hides absolute control. Why does the West support these regimes? Because our values are for sale. We talk about democracy when it serves us. We ignore it when there are contracts to sign. Oman is the mirror of our hypocrisy. Every politician who shakes the Sultan's hand approves all this. Every tourist who posts photos contributes to the illusion. And young people who want change? Trapped between a government that represses and a West that doesn't give a damn. Oman is a bomb. Explosive debt, finite resources, frustrated youth. One day it will explode. Oman isn't the most sinful country, but it's one of the most hypocritical, a place where morality is preached and violated, where rights are empty words, where tolerance is marketing. It has perfected the art of appearing what it's not. But you, who now know the truth, will you continue believing the narrative, or will you start asking uncomfortable questions? If you want to discover the hidden truths that nobody tells, subscribe. The next journey will be even more disturbing. This was the real Oman behind the mask. See? You on the other side, explorer.